talking too much about the fight with Trump or about Senator Schumer. I think the sort of message of fear and opposition has worked for the Trump campaigns previously, but it's not it doesn't seem to be a great strategy on the Democratic side. There's a lot, if you have Democratic values, to fear in the Trump administration, but a different message seems to resonate with that side.
I think the last word should go to a Maine voter who yelled at our Maine-based producer, "Too early," is really what their thoughts were. So thank you both. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. This is On Point.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and is distributed by APM, American Public Media.
Support for On Point comes from Seed. Seed's DSO1 is a 24-strain 2-in-1 probiotic and prebiotic engineered to survive digestion, support healthy regularity, and promote whole body health. Learn more at seed.com/public. And BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy. Clients are matched with one of 30,000 therapists and can communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public.
This is KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, and KQOW Bellingham. It's almost noon, almost time for Week in Review, and here's host Bill Radke to give you a preview of today's show.
Yes, and I give you a preview in the hopes that you'll stay tuned. So maybe if I tell you that we'll talk about the No Kings protests coming up, and are those going to rile up our president into sending troops our way? Should we even be gaming that possibility? We'll talk about how Seattle's trying to make homes more affordable and who wins and loses, what to do about our little plastic bags, and, of course, what made us smile this week. I promise you that. So, please do stick around.
Catch all the local newscasts in a new place. Your podcast feed. Listen to KUOW Newscast, updated every hour with new headlines. Find it in the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Support for KUOW comes from the Bellingham Farmers Market, supporting agriculture with farmers, artisans, and other producers from Whatcom and Skagit counties. This 100-stall market is 90 minutes north of the Seattle metro region. Open Saturdays from 10 to 2. Info at bellinghamfarmersmarket.org. And from Forecast Coffee, partnering with farms that practice agroforestry and donating a portion of their profits to reforestation efforts. Available at PCC community markets and other local retailers. Home delivery options at forecastcoffeecompany.com.
From National Public Radio in Washington, I'm Susan Stamberg.
We lost one of public radio's most treasured voices and an NPR founding mother.
We felt we were pioneers, taking listeners to stories, offering the best pictures we could find. The pictures are always better on the radio, you know.
Join us for a special remembrance of Susan Stamberg from NPR News.
This special broadcast coming your way tomorrow at 11 a.m. here on KUOW. News headlines in 30 seconds.
Your days are busy, but no matter what's on your to-do list, KUOW is here to keep you company. Catch up on local, national, and international news over your morning coffee with Morning Edition, or on your commute home with All Things Considered. Squeeze in a little dose of local flavor with Soundside at lunch, and sprinkle a little arts and culture into your evening with Fresh Air. No matter what you've got going on, KUOW's got you covered. Listen at 94.9 Seattle or on the KUOW app.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is seeking more weapons assistance from the United States. He is meeting with President Trump at the White House this hour. Ahead of the talks, Trump talked about long-range weapons capabilities.
We need Tomahawks, so we need a lot of other weapons that we're sending to Ukraine. One of the reasons we want to get this war over is exactly that. It's not easy for us to give. You're talking about massive numbers of very powerful weapons. So that's one of the things we'll be talking about. Hopefully they won't need it.
Trump says he believes Russian President Vladimir Putin wants to end the war. The two leaders spoke yesterday, Trump says, for more than 2 hours. Both are expected to meet soon in Hungary. President Trump is attempting to broker a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, as he had done between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, and reporters asked about it during today's talks. It's been a week since the ceasefire in Gaza. As part of the agreement, Israel pledged to allow in dramatically more aid to the devastated Palestinian territory. NPR's Jana Raff reports that is not happening as planned.
The UN and international aid groups say Israel is revoking authorization for some major aid organizations to send food and medicine to Gaza. The new rules affect some of the biggest U.S.-based aid groups. New Israeli rules for re-registering aid organizations include vetting groups for statements critical of Israel's actions. Israel has also kept closed a main crossing from Egypt to Gaza, where many aid groups have had hundreds of trucks waiting for months. All of that means not nearly enough aid is coming in to combat famine or prepare for winter. Jana Raff, NPR News, Amman.
Organizers of the No Kings movement say they expect millions of protesters to gather across the United States this weekend to demonstrate against Trump administration policies. NPR's Alana Weiss has details.
Organizers are planning for a wave of protests spanning from coast to coast. This comes as the government enters into its third week of shutdown, and viral video has shown masked ICE agents detaining people with little to no explanation. Saturday's planned demonstrations follow major No Kings protests this summer. Then, organizers claim they saw about 5 million people take to the streets. This weekend's protests could produce an even higher turnout. White House spokeswoman Abigail Jackson responded to the prospect of mass demonstrations, stating simply, "Who cares?" Alana Wise, NPR News.
A No Kings rally was expected to kick off this afternoon at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. From Washington, it's NPR News.
In Seattle, this is KUOW News. I'm Ruby DeLuna. The candidates for Seattle mayor took on bike safety at a forum held by environmental groups this week. Incumbent Mayor Bruce Harrell said the city has seen fewer pedestrian deaths since he took office and had no bicyclist deaths last year, thanks in part to recent changes.
When I directed our department to prohibit right turns all around the city, my email box was full because people don't, but we're saving lives.
Harrell's opponent, Katie Wilson, founded the advocacy group the Transit Riders Union and is hoping to unseat Harrell. She says she rides a bike and would support better connected bike trails.
Obviously looking at our recently passed transportation levy and making sure that we're making the most effective use possible of the funds in that levy for bicycle infrastructure to be building out that connected network.
Wilson said she'd also support local funding for electric bike rebates. Amazon is reportedly preparing to cut roughly 1,500 positions, according to Fortune. The company's People Experience and Technology division currently has about 10,000 employees. The timing and local impact in the Puget Sound region are unclear, but the move continues a recent trend of layoffs across Seattle's tech industry. Amazon is Washington's largest employer with about 65,000 corporate workers. It has already made cuts at AWS, communications, and retail units. You're listening to KUOW News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive. Progressive Commercial Auto Insurance protects the vehicles that work to keep small businesses moving forward, including protection while running errands and other tasks at progressivecommercial.com.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. I missed you all. I've been away a couple of weeks. Maybe that'll come up a little bit later, what I was doing. But I'm back, and I'm happy to have a panel of know-somethings with me. I've got the contributing editor at The Urbanist, Ryan Packer. Welcome back.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Nonfiction writer, journalist, Lauryn Bray. Welcome back.
Hello.
Washington. Oh, that was a mellifluous hello. Is that the right word, mellifluous? Hello. Washington Policy Center Vice President for Research, Todd Myers. Thanks for being here, Todd.
Thanks for having me. Go Mariners.
Go Mariners. That might come up as well on this show. You can watch. You can guess how many people. Oh, you don't have your cap on anyway right now. Is that a superstition, by the way?
That's not one, but I have many others.
Yeah, I've been coming up against lots of superstitions this week. So anyway, we're on YouTube because we live stream the show. You just search KUOW Public Radio. You'll find us there. Quickly before we begin, I just want to invite you, all of you, to my year in review show. We do this every year. At the end of the year, it's a little bit early this time, Thursday, December 4th. We're going to be at Town Hall Seattle, as we were last year. Special guests and goodies, and it all happens at 7:30 on December 4th. So get your tickets, by the way, by going to kuow.org/events. Go to our homepage, events. All right, who's going to a No Kings protest tomorrow? Anybody here?
Sure. Yeah. Definitely going to head out.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think I might stop by.
Okay. Todd?
I will be celebrating in Bend, Oregon with a friend who's having his birthday party, and I will be doing something more productive.
More productive? Even more productive than a rally against expansion of executive power?
Yes, not against opposition to expansion of executive power, but more productive than a rally against. Yeah,
I see. Well, for those who don't know, there were these peaceful No Kings rallies here back in June, and Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell said he wants a repeat of that.
Don't take the bait. And that's what they want us to do. They want to create chaos. We do not want that kind of chaos here.
And why does he not want chaos? Well, KUOW reporter Amy Radel told us that local officials don't want to provoke President Trump.
President Donald Trump is attempting to deploy National Guard troops in Portland, and Seattle officials are concerned that the same could happen here. Seattle Deputy Mayor and General Counsel Greg Wong says any confrontation this weekend could inflame things further.
If there's something that goes sideways on that at all, or any sort of thing that happens that damages federal property, that could be the excuse.
The police department's chief operating officer, Brian Maxey, said he's currently attending a conference of police chiefs from major cities.
I was just talking to Chief Day out of Portland and admiring the absurdly peaceful protests that are happening down there that are so wonderful because you can't do much in a frog suit. We could go that direction, would love it.
You can't do much in a frog suit. Have you all seen Portland's protests? PDX. They're kind of what Seattle used to be, funny costumes and naked cyclists.
Since Portland is allegedly on fire and burning down, and it's like a war zone, I figured the best way we could show who we really are is by expressing ourselves completely, and being naked is a wonderful way to say F you.
How did Portland become the merry pranksters and Seattle is pro sports and Teslas? Sigh. So you're going to the protest, and what's it going to be like? Will you be naked, Ryan?
I won't be naked, thankfully.
Will you be a unicorn or a Pikachu or a frog?
I'll mostly just be going to check out, what my neighbors are saying about the crisis facing our country. I admit I was actually a little reticent to go to the first one of these a couple months ago, but I did turn out, and it actually ended up being a great community building exercise. So I think it was pretty productive.
Lauren, what do you think your vibe will be?
I know I promised my Saturday to somebody, or at least some portion of it, so I have to see when I can go. But I definitely would go with a journalist intention. I'd want to see what was going on, similar to Ryan, what people are saying. And yeah, I'd just observe.
Yeah. Speaking of reactions to President Trump, did you hear about the Governor's Public Health Alliance? The coalition of 15 states with Democratic governors who say they're going to lay out alternatives to Robert Kennedy Jr.'s policies. Does that seem, you were saying, Todd, that you didn't think these protests are effective. What do you think of a 15-state Governors Public Health Alliance?
Well, the thing I always think about protests, just real quickly on that subject, is that I remember that Bill McKibben and Shama Sawant did it in the teens, like 2012 or something like that, a climate march, and like their slogan was, "This changes everything." So here we are 13 years later, we've had Donald Trump twice, and we have no more climate policies at the national level. So we talk ourselves into that these are meaningful, but they're not, and they don't.
So you never go to a protest or a rally? You think there's just no civic purpose in them?
I think that there are about 1,000 things you can do that are much more productive civically, up to and including volunteering to clean up a park or, do other things, help people directly.
How do you know that the people at these protests aren't also doing that?
Yeah, why not both?
Well, because
Porque no los dos, you know?
Porque no está importante. There's other things that are more important. You can,
well, how about both? We don't have to do only one most important thing.
But time is, there's a limited amount of time, right? Saying, well,
there's Mariner games to watch.
Well, I'm going to waste. I'm going to spend a Saturday. But the purpose of these is to show that you care and show it is more of about a personal thing than it is to a productive thing. And I can show you. I mean, there's so many examples of protests where they say, "Oh, this is going to turn the tide," and it doesn't. There's
civil rights protests did no.
Now that's the example that people always have. But the civil rights movement was not about just civil rights protests.
Not just,
right? There was other things that the work that they did was far more important in terms of the protests. But the protests in that example, I agree, they made a point. But that's the touchstone that everybody goes back to and says, well, what about the civil rights protest? Why? Like that was in the 60s.
So you think
if there were more useful examples, you would say them. The WTO riots. Another perfect example. Is the WTO changed? Did the WTO riots do anything? No. And the reason people go back to the civil rights is because it is the one example, but it is 60 years ago. So, I am not happy with what Donald Trump is doing in a number of ways in expanding executive authority. But believe me, the last thing I am going to do is protest. And the other thing
so you think they're performative is what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
I would go to ACT UP protests in the 1980s, raising awareness of HIV and AIDS. But to me, the issue is the fact that the Trump regime is calling this a Hate America rally, which has real don't put in the newspaper that I'm mad energy. They don't like that this is happening, which I think actually makes me want to go out in the street more. There's nothing more American than your right to peaceful protest. It's literally in our Constitution, which this regime is currently shredding up.
Well, the thing about Donald Trump that makes him so successful is he tends to posit these things that are in protest of him as in protest of America. Like if you attack Donald Trump, you're attacking America. And that is like what a true fascist leader is really good at doing. And I think that he banks a lot on people feeding into that in order to change people's course of action, to keep people from not protesting or from not speaking out against him.
I know.
Is this a Hate America rally, as even the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, called it, Todd?
No, but like freedom of speech is wonderful, and we ought to have more of it. And so, people are totally free to do that. My point is that it's not productive. And if you think that Donald Trump doesn't want pictures of people in frog suits and naked people protesting him, you are wrong. He gets upset. He gets triggered by any criticism of him. Absolutely. But if you think that showing up in frog suits and riding naked is the way to protest him, and you think that Republicans and Trump supporters won't use that against the protest, you are wrong.
Well, I guess I don't know who uses what against what and what the effect of that. That's I'm not that smart. But the theory is that as opposed to these protesters are viciously smashing property, they are taking the Mickey, as the Brits would say.
I think the Trump regime would absolutely love for the protests that happen to be black bloc, Antifa, card-carrying members or whatever those are, people like that, as opposed to wine mom showing up on Saturday with a funny protest sign. I think they would actually absolutely love to have that be their main antagonist, but that's not the reality.
I mean, it's 2025 and Donald Trump is still talking about CHOP, So I think that there's people that don't want to take the bait in the sense of giving Donald Trump the protest that he's waiting on from Seattle based off of how he expected the city to behave after his election. And I think and we'll talk about the threats to deploy a National Guard, I assume, but I think that there's
well, we could talk about that now. Do you think they're connected?
Well, yeah, I do. I think he's been baiting Seattle a lot, to do that. I think he just because some of the, and I can't quote him, and I wish I would have looked this up because I didn't think I was going to get into this, but I should have had the foresight. But I think he's been baiting Seattle a lot, even before he was elected. about CHOP and expecting that energy from Seattle.
CHOP was the so-called occupied zone on Capitol Hill during the George Floyd protests, etc.
Yeah. And I feel like that there's a lot of fear that maybe this protest might turn into that, but that's just not giving the vibe at all. And I think that a lot of the officials that are kind of talking about some of the fear that they might have in regard to what he's threatening to do to Portland coming here has a lot to do with like some of the fun lightheartedness that we're seeing in this protest, if that makes sense.
I think the baiting is an interesting element of this. We have, Bruce Harrell, in an election where I think it really does help him to look tough against the Trump administration. And so I think that's kind of leading to some interesting dynamics. Is it really the best idea to have a press conference that just says, we don't want you here, when no one's talking about coming? Like that, it almost seems like you're kind of begging the question.
Who was he saying he doesn't want here?
The National Guard. They had a press conference with Nick Brown.
Right. Okay, well, we're going to get into a little more about Seattle stuff a little bit later in the show. Before we leave the this topic, did we cover it? We're agreeing that criticizing the government, I heard us agree that that's a cherished right, and disagreeing about whether it does much of anything, whether it's performative. Okay, well, this rally, the No Kings rally, there'll be many of them across Washington State tomorrow, including at Seattle Center tomorrow at noon, so you can go or stay away as you will. That's the No Kings rally, not technically the Hate America rally. What about Toronto Blue Jays fans at T-Mobile Park? Is that a Hate America rally? By the way, if you see a Toronto fan, do not punch them in the nose.
Don't take the bait. And that's what they want us to do. They want to create chaos. We do not want that kind of chaos here.
No, we don't. Although the playoff series is tied, we were discussing this earlier before the microphones came on. The playoff series is 2-2, but so many Seattle fans are acting very hangdog about it.
Yeah, like I said, we are reverting to form because we've seen this before and been disappointed before. So, but you're right. It's if you had told me last Saturday that we would be 2-2 after 4 games, I would be happy. I would want more, but I would be happy. And so let's be happy. And we have our good pitchers going the next 3 games. We're going to the World Series.
Oh, okay. Who do you blame for the Mariners' last 2 defeats?
I blame the fact that sometimes the opponent gets a say, and the Toronto Blue Jays are a good team.
Yeah, that angers me too. A lot of people are blaming Humpy, understandably. Does everybody know who Humpy is? Nope. You know who Humpy is, Todd.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Humpy delivered a win on Friday night.
I know. So. It seems a little unfair. So that for listeners who don't know, very briefly here, the Mariners marketing department has 4 people, I think, in mascot costumes race each other in a salmon run every game.
Yeah.
Home game. And one of them is a pink salmon named Humpy who wears a life jacket and has always lost.
Right.
Humpy never wins. Last week, a game went so long into extra innings, a playoff game, that they ran a second salmon run and Humpy won. And the Mariners won that game. We were talking about superstitions, Todd.
Yeah.
So a lot of people thought, well, Humpy won and the Mariners won, so Humpy needs to keep winning. But it hasn't worked out that way. No. The next salmon run, Humpy won again. How can Humpy win again? The mayor proclaimed it Humpy Day, and the Mariners have lost twice since then.
Yeah, well, I as someone who has worked on salmon recovery efforts for more than a decade, anybody who wants to blame salmon for the loss is an enemy of me. They are the true anti-Americans.
Oh, really? So the salmon are the heroes here?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing on social media, we need to kill Humpy on the field to appease the baseball gods. Humpy must die. Time to sacrifice Humpy. It does seem a little harsh. I was thinking we could bring in one of those fat bears from Alaska, but I'm not anti-Humpy either. And you know what? Whenever the Week in Review discussion turns to ritual animal sacrifice, that's when we take a short break and we reset things and we ask ourselves who we are and whether we're taking a game too seriously. Go Mariners, though, right?
Absolutely, go Mariners.
Okay. Or go Canadians, depending on how you lean. Let's take a little break and come right back and talk about our city, our fair city, and other stuff on Week in Review. Stay tuned.
Support for KUOW comes from Eco Design and Maintenance, family owned and specializing in start to finish exterior design using materials and methods that help to reduce environmental impact. From landscapes to hardscaping, outdoor spaces designed to be functional and long-lasting. More at eco-seattle.com.
Stick with KUOW for local election coverage. Listen to candidate interviews and debates on Soundside.
This election season, there are a couple of very closely watched state legislative races that
Get analysis of local races on the Sound Politics podcast.
As gridlock has gripped Congress, lobbying spending in states like ours has shot up.
And find the latest campaign news on KUOW.org. We'll help you make decisions as you prepare your ballot. Stay tuned to 94.9 FM or with the KUOW app.
You're listening to KUOW's Week in Review, which means you're listening to me, Bill Radke, and from the Urbanist, Ryan Packer, from Washington Policy Center, Todd Myers, and we have journalist Lauryn Bray here, and we're all visible on YouTube. Just search KUOW Public Radio. Shopping in Seattle is about to get a little more expensive. The City Council approved a sales tax increase of 0.1%, bringing it to 10.35%. The money to be used for public safety purposes. The only no vote came from City Council member Maritza Rivera.
I just think we should be looking at the budget and find money to pay for those things out of our existing budget, but not that we should be increasing a sales tax. It's really a regressive tax that's going to hurt our low-income families.
City Council President Sarah Nelson agreed that a sales tax does hit low-income people disproportionately. However,
the state gives us very limited set of tools to raise revenue for the essential services that the city provides. And I don't like that this is a regressive tax, but this isn't about raising taxes on working families. This is about using public safety dollars for public safety.
Ryan, who's right?
I mean, good points on both sides, I think. And don't forget, King County is also implementing the same sales tax increase, the 10th of 1%. So it's going to be a double dip in Seattle.
The state legislature gave them permission to do that recently.
Yeah, if you recall, this is actually kind of the byproduct of the governor's promise to invest in more police, but that ended up kind of going through the legislative process and turning into whatever cities want to spend that money on. They have broad latitude. What I'm looking at here is, looks like the city's about to spend about half of it on new programs, expanding the CARE team, which is the non-police response team in Seattle, and then probably about the other half to backfill existing programs that they were probably already going to spend on.
So is this kind of like the Amazon, the payroll tax that was supposed to be used for
It's like the payroll
housing.
tax. It's like the sweetened beverage tax. It's kind of it's become a little bit of a budget shell game of a system in terms of using these dedicated funds to kind of fudge the numbers.
Yes, Lauryn, you were agreeing?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the strategy is to just create these taxes that essentially everyone has to pay into, but as we heard, disproportionately affect communities, low-income communities. There needs to be a progressive tax, like at this, and I know at the state level it's not happening, at the city level it's not happening, but at what point do we look at alternative means to create a progressive tax? And I know that Washington has been a tax haven for the rich, and its history is just been stacked up against that, and we see it consistently fail every year.
And we have some more progressive taxes, especially lately, the payroll tax and the move to make the B&O tax more progressive than it was, right?
Yeah, but the progressive taxes are not. We don't have enough of them. Yeah.
By the way, grocery stores would not call the B&O restructuring very progressive because they work on low margins.
And that's always the thing. There's always a debate if it's actually progressive or not.
Right.
Yeah.
What I think is always interesting about these debates is, okay, should we spend money on this or that, or public safety? And as you pointed out, that they're because money is fungible, they can use the public safety money and then put the money that they would have put in something else. The question is that so often is there's no question of, okay, does this project actually work?
There's no work done toward making it work.
That is rarely part of the discussion. There are these theories about, oh, well, if we did this community policing or did this, it'll make it better, and then we don't see it. right? We are now on year 20 of a 10-year plan to end homelessness in King County and Seattle. In my area, in the environment, we spend lots of money on things that don't improve the environment. And I think that more discussion should be focused on, all right, what is working and let's prioritize what's working, rather than the first thing we do is like, okay, let's figure out how to get more money. That I think is the fundamental question that never gets debated. It's like, oh, what's the impact on these people? What's the impact on these people? How we need more money to fund the program. And I think that is what is missing. And it's why, on crime, on homelessness, on so many of the things we're failing. At the same time, there's a national ranking of states, and this is not Seattle, but this is states, that shows that over the last decade, Washington went from the 6th best business tax climate to 45th. So the notion
what is a best business tax climate? How do you define that?
So the Tax Foundation looks at the climate for bringing businesses to Washington State, allowing them to grow, allowing them to innovate. So they have a series of rankings that look at every state. Like I said, we went from 6th to 45th. So the notion that we haven't increased taxes or that we haven't taxed businesses or other things like that is just simply false. It's not true. We have radically increased taxes across the board and targeted on businesses. And the result is that, there's a recent report by Moody's that there's about a third of the states that they think are in recession, and Washington is one of them. That's very bad. So we can talk about how to improve public safety, but the notion that we haven't taxed businesses or other folks is not accurate.
I would say that even some people that talk about progressive tax revenue would argue against business taxes because they usually get leveraged on the consumer anyway. So you're still finding ways to harm the everyday man. For example, the best example is, I forget what legislation specifically it was, because once again, I didn't think I was going to be talking about this, but the city of Seattle had created legislation that made it so that rideshare companies like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Uber had to pay their dashers, their riders, whatever, a decent wage, a minimum wage.
The pay up legislation.
Yes, thank you, pay up legislation. After they passed that, DoorDash, Uber, all these companies, they created a $5 fee on their consumer to leverage that money. They didn't want to pay it out of their own pocket. And so what they saw was this huge dip in consumer, people using the business. People stopped using DoorDash, people stopped using Uber. And a lot of people, that's why if you ever saw the city council meetings, every week there were Uber drivers and rideshare people showing up and saying this is trash. And it was because of that. So business taxes, again, they always get leveraged on the consumer.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to bring this back to the larger city budget, which I think, deserves some attention. The fact that we have a mayor facing a very tough re-election bid, piling on new spending that his successor might have to deal with. There's about $50 million in new spending in this budget that we were already facing a deficit in 2027. We're adding on surveillance cameras. We're taking the graffiti team to 22 people, which is actually more people than work at the Vision Zero team at SDOT. And so, the question is kind of...
Vision Zero has to do with reducing fatalities.
Yeah. And so we have twice as many people handling graffiti abatement than we have pedestrian safety. And so, the question is whether it's a really responsible budget, even setting aside the 0.1% sales tax.
Yeah, because he's also spending, $800,000 on AI and data integration or...
Yeah, we're going to have a pilot, I think, for AI and permitting, which is going to be paid out of the general fund, even though permits usually pay for themselves. Permit fees pay for stuff like that. So,
okay, well, this mayor's office says that this $39 million estimated that'll be raised from the sales tax increase in the first year, this would go for unarmed crisis responders, non-court diversion programs, drug treatment, and firefighters. But I'm hearing you say that this is just, the city's just going to end up moving money into the general fund to pay down a budget deficit.
Yeah, I'm sure there could be some new spending, which is always popular, but then there's also going to be some backfilling. I think there was a great quote in the Seattle Times actually this morning, kind of about how the mayor is using kind of interesting math, assuming underspending next year, kind of on their balance sheet. The quote from the central staffer was, "We've used the toolkit, and now we're looking in the junk drawer, and we've got a bunch of twist ties in there."
But Todd, I don't think you would disagree with that.
Well, and they do the same thing at the state. They use what are called reversions, which is money that they didn't spend to balance the budget. So, and that's sort of wishful thinking. I think, again, I think there are certainly things that government should spend money on. Public safety, right? Seattle has a higher crime rate than it should. People are concerned about it. And so let's do things, but let's make sure that they work. And then I think you can go to the public and say, here's why we're doing this. The fact that this wasn't put on the ballot, I think, is telling, right? They don't have to. They're not required to put it on the ballot. But the fact that it's put on the ballot indicates that there's some nervousness that people might not go for it.
We are constantly talking, this is like our ongoing coverage of how Seattle could make itself a more affordable place to live, which is why I wanted to tell you about something interesting that the city did this week. You know that developers can get a property tax break for charging lower rents, right? But city leaders say developers are still not building enough housing. And why not? Well, here's local developer Norris Cooper saying, why not?
We're at a time where we are battling tariffs and interest rates, escalating construction costs.
So to entice developers to build more despite those headwinds, this week the council voted unanimously to increase the amount of rent that these developers can charge. Lauren, who wins and loses from this?
Well, the argument is that it's going to incentivize developers to create more housing, and therefore it'll be more housing for more people to live in. But if the housing is like hiked up from what it already is, which is already unaffordable for a lot of people, then who's going to be living in these apartments? I think it's going to kind of create a situation where you have a city like the best example is New York, but there's a few cities like this where you have a bunch of like rental space, like high-rise luxury apartments that are empty and no one is living in because there's no like checks and balances for developers to create like housing that is affordable based off of the people that live in the neighborhood.
But how would that benefit developers if no one's living in their project?
That's a good question. You know, that's something that I think about when I'm like, if you're building these buildings and like no one's paying into this rent, like what are you getting out of this? Like, what are you using these buildings for? So that's something I have to look into myself. But I guess they don't care to create these buildings and have them be vacant and no one live in them.
Ryan, I know you also write about this.
Yeah, Seattle loves Rube Goldberg machines to kind of make sure that we are getting affordable housing through a very convoluted process that doesn't give developers too much profit and doesn't, leave too many people out. The MFTE program that we're talking about here
is multifamily tax exemption.
Is one of those. And so, the question is the balance right between rent levels that will still allow a building to get built, but might be too high for some people. And so it's a kind of a rent cap discussion. The developer doesn't have to set the rent that high, but the question is kind of what's the upper limit? And it's really hard to get that calibration right. There's just, you have to predict the future basically. And all they can do is look at the past and look at the program that we had until it expired this year, which wasn't really producing very much housing. And the only real question, the thing we absolutely know is that when you have an MFTE program that doesn't build any housing, no one's using it, then it's helping no one.
And it's also like, it then again forces another group of people that could possibly maybe buy a house or could have bought a house if there was a house to buy. Because once again, we have to realize that the average cost of a home in Seattle is about $650,000. So then say if it was a little bit less, say if it was around like $400,000, or if it matched some of the prices of other cities, you would have someone that would be probably more willing or more able to invest in getting a house for around $400,000, now having to rent in one of these apartments and not be able to be a homeowner or engage in all of the things that you can get from building equity and all of that, because that right there puts you in a higher position. I also asked my parents this, and I don't really want to tell their business, but they had told me that they pay less on their mortgage than like the average cost of a rental apartment in the city.
Are they here in Seattle?
Yeah.
The interesting thing here, I thought, was that we had on one side of this, there was opposition from Katie Wilson, who's running for mayor, who said this doesn't do enough for renters and had concerns about the rent caps being too high. And on the other side, you had the anti-development community, sort of NIMBY community in Seattle doesn't like the fact that this is a property tax benefit to developers. But it ended up at a 9-0 vote with Alexis Mercedes Rink and Maritza Rivera and Bob Kettle and Rob Saka all supporting it. And I go back to, I was trying to think about kind of the theory behind this all week. And I think it goes back to it's something that they can say that they did for housing without actually upzoning or, making apartments legal in more neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Any reaction, Todd?
Yeah, I think to the point of it being Rube Goldberg, I think it's not just Rube Goldberg. It is sort of a distraction from the fundamental problems of zoning and the cost of building and things like that. There's no doubt that in the clip they mentioned tariffs and interest rates. Interest rates especially, I think, are very difficult right now for building and buying. But this issue didn't appear last year or the year before. This has been an ongoing issue for decades. And the fundamental problem is that we keep making it more difficult through regulations and growth management and things like that to build. And that, I think, is the part that people don't want to touch. So they say, okay, well, we don't want to touch all the things that are the core of the problem. So why don't we create we'll create a government program to fix the problems created by this other government program. And that's why you get these Rube Goldberg solutions, is because they have to be complicated, because the number one priority is not to undermine the things that are the core of the problem, because those are ideological beliefs that they have about the way these things should be done. So
an unregulated free market system would be less Rube Goldbergy, but would create different kinds of losers and winners, right?
Maybe, but if you think that you can plan who gets to win and who gets to lose and calibrate that correctly, look at Seattle's affordability right now and tell me how that's going, right?
I mean, it is going fairly well, relatively speaking. We have had flat rents in the city for several years, I have to say, and that's because we've been getting units online.
How is Seattle's affordability compared to other cities? We are horrible. We are extremely expensive.
Well, maybe we'll get cheaper as companies lay off workers for AI programs.
Yeah, I would say we spent 3 decades not doing anything about the problem. So can't solve it overnight.
Well, I wouldn't say not doing anything. I would say making it worse, because that's why we've got. And so you can say, well, hey, fine, we are, we're building more now, fine, but there's a long way to go. We have dug ourselves a big hole. And these Rube Goldberg approaches are because I think fundamentally that they don't want to take the steps to solve the core problems.
One more city issue before we take a break. Seattle's got a new anti-prostitution strategy whereby police notice a car on Aurora Avenue North, and the driver is allegedly talking with a sex worker. SPD takes down the license plate and mails a letter to the car's registered owner. Quote, "The purpose of this letter is to serve as a warning to you that persons operating your vehicle were engaged in suspected sexual exploitation activity. SPD is not accusing you of a crime, and no criminal charges will follow based on this incident. If you or someone you know needs help to stop sexual exploitation activity, there are nonprofit organizations that may be able to assist." Lauren, what do you think of this Dear John letter?
At first, I thought it was pretty funny.
Funny?
I was
How
like,
so?
well, because I just thought of imagine you're a mother or a wife, and you get this letter in the mail, and you're obviously aware that this is not you, So you're looking at the other person
Who's
living
opening
in the
mail?
house.
Yeah.
Right. You're looking at the other person that's living in the house, and you're just completely flabbergasted by the behavior that you were completely ignorant of. But I then thought about the effectiveness, or the question of whether or not it is effective, and how that one kind of opens up a bigger one about shame, and whether or not shaming people is an incentive for them to change their behavior.
I did see that. I want to hear from the rest of you. I saw, I don't believe any one survey or any one study, but I saw for what it's worth, what little it's worth, the National Center of Sexual Exploitation said that 75% of respondents indicated that a letter sent to their homes or families would deter them from engaging with prostitutes.
Okay.
I mean, of course you're going to say that it would.
Yeah, right. Fair. Any other reaction?
I just think it's interesting that Seattle Police Department is chasing suspected graffiti artists with King County helicopters through Capitol Hill, and we're sending letters on Aurora.
What would you recommend?
I just think that the disparity between those two things is wild to me.
Mm.
But the
Yeah.
the letters, I mean, I would really like to hear from experts on sex trafficking, but it feels like we've been just oscillating on how to combat this issue for decades in Seattle.
Yeah.
Todd, anything more?
Yeah, I think it's not my area of expertise, so I'm not, I'm reluctant to weigh in. There's a part of me that is nervous about police saying, we think we saw you doing something that may possibly be illegal, and so we're going to tell people about it without having to prove it.
Well, is there a tell people about it element? Because I'm just seeing that there's a letter being sent to the home. So it just is up to whoever's opening that letter.
We're going to tell the most important people in your life about it, even though we don't have proof.
Even if the letter is addressed to that person, though, like that just, to me, it's like whatever arrangement you have with the people in your home, if they're allowed to open your mail or not. Because like legally, if the letter is addressed to you saying, hey, we saw you doing this, we just want to let you know there's resources available,
Does
is what it sounds like the letter is.
Return address say SPD prostitution unit? Or
Yeah.
like that?
I would be curious to know what if it says like human trafficking's division or like what. Yeah.
San Francisco sends a letter and a photo of the motorist interacting with the alleged sex worker. Well, by the way, this whole question, the city's response to prostitution, is just one of the issues that voters get a chance to decide on next month in our election, because the Seattle city attorney is running for re-election, Ann Davison, and her challenger is Erica Evans. I tell you this, and this is, you may know that the city has a stay out of areas of prostitution law, the SOAP law. Anyone who's been charged, not necessarily convicted, just even charged with a prostitution-related offense can be forbidden from going to Aurora Avenue North and a couple blocks on either side of it. KUOW just held a candidate debate on, that was just one issue, several issues in this discussion, this debate between Davison and Evans, and you can hear that as you're preparing to vote by going to Soundside at KUOW.org. Our podcast Soundside is covering these issues for you every single day. Just go to KUOW.org. Do we about cover it for now? Should we take a little break? Okay, more week in review to come, including what made 4 human beings smile. And that's not a bad thing. Stay tuned.
Support for KUOW comes from Third Place Books. Adam Johnson, author of The Orphan Master's Son, discusses his new 700-page novel, The Wayfinder, on Monday, October 20th at 7 p.m. Tickets and information are available at thirdplacebooks.com.
And from UW Medicine, where the same doctors caring for patients are also helping to advance medical research and teaching the next generation of physicians. More at uwmedicine.org. UW Medicine, a higher degree of healthcare.
I'm Chris Morgan. Join me on the next season of The Wild as we bring you up close to some of our world's most resilient and extraordinary creatures. From jaguars to hummingbirds, we'll explore how these species are finding ways to adapt and thrive in their fast-changing world. New episodes start October 21st. Listen to The Wild on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Week in Review on KUOW. I host the show. I'm Bill Radke, and I have assembled today Washington Policy Center's Todd Myers, journalist Lauryn Bray, and urbanists Ryan Packer. We are talking about the news of this week. Should we keep banning the thin plastic grocery bag? 4 years ago, Washington State outlawed these so-called single-use plastic bags. Businesses have to use thicker bags with 40% recycled content or use paper bags and charge customers 8 cents for either bag. The state commissioned a study on how effective its policy has been as of 2022 anyway. And Todd, it sounds like the state was not satisfied with the study it commissioned.
Yeah, so it asked a couple of Washington State University professors to do it. They turned it in last December. The Department of Commerce sat on it for 9 months before releasing it, and then appended a 4-page sort of rebuttal, pseudo-rebuttal to it that they didn't tell the professors about, saying that, well, it may be true that we are now using more plastic.
This is what the WSU report found.
Correct. They found more plastic and also more plastic in the waste stream. There were other things that they found that are consistent with past studies done by other organizations around the world showing that plastic bag bans backfire on the environment. But what I thought was interesting...
Can we just briefly tell the listeners the reasoning is that the number of plastic bags, the little thin ones, went down as you'd expect. But then you have thicker plastic bags that people are not reusing enough to keep out of the
Right. So when
waste
people
stream.
go to the store now, they know that the plastic bags they get are much thicker. And the idea is that they'll be reused. The thin ones were reused, but the number of bags that people use has gone down. But the new ones are so much thicker that they more than offset the reduction in use. And so for both in terms of total plastic production and plastic in the waste stream. But what I thought was interesting is that in their rebuttal, they don't really... reject that because there have been numerous studies. This is not the only one that shows that. But what they said is, well, but there are other social and other reasons to do this, which they do not explain, and that are purely subjective. And so this is what I see in environment all the time, which is that when people say, we follow the science, but then when the science doesn't work out, they say, well, but there are other benefits, and they're more speculative, they're more subjective, that allow agencies and politicians to kind of do whatever they want when the data don't go their way.
This was a super interesting study to read. I probably wouldn't have done it without being on this show.
You're welcome.
And apart from if you take it at face value, so the Department of Commerce noted that this was from one bag distributor from 2021, 2022. So that is a fairly small sample size. They don't have great data on the point of sale because a lot of places don't actually record how many bags they're giving away.
And to highlight that, Ryan, I'll let you continue. The study authors acknowledged that they struggled to obtain comprehensive data due to the pandemic and lack of cooperation from some distributors. So the study is based on sales data from, as you said, one bag distributor covering 2021 to 2022.
And they couldn't even actually get agreement on what the bags cost to kind of weigh the cost benefit. In terms of the waste stream question, which is to me the other side of this equation, the big question, because, okay, we had a 50% drop in the number of bags, but the amount of plastic went up by 17%. But the question is how much of that's getting in the waste stream, because it's not just a carbon issue, it's how much littering and gunk is getting in our environment.
Littering and microplastic.
And there was a lot of, it actually said it was not clear how much was in the waste stream. Some data points have shown it going up, but these are like all the garbage. So this is from 2019 to 2025. How much plastic have you gotten in the mail from Amazon that you're throwing away that's getting caught in that? And so, I understand why this wasn't used to make a policy decision, because the recommendation was to drop the ban on single-use plastics and just let people regulate themselves with the cost. But we don't really, and then also, like, I think they wanted to triple or quadruple the cost of the really thick plastic bags so they better match their actual impact.
Which is happening to some extent. Next year, in January, the fee is going to go up another 4 cents.
Yeah. But I didn't see that whole, ultimately, I don't think you can really make a full policy decision based on the results of that, again, super interesting survey.
I have the qualitative data to tell you exactly what's happening here. So the
qualitative.
The anecdotal qualitative data, I will tell you. The thin plastic bags were being reused by pet owners, okay?
Mm-hmm.
When they were thinner, it was much more convenient. You could wrap it around your hand, you could pick it right up, you could flip it in and out. The thick ones, you can't do that as easily with, so there are less pet owners reusing the thick plastic bags. That's number one. They're not making the thin ones as much anymore, so you can't use the plastic bags that you liked using. And on top of that, they're marketing plastic bags to pet owners. Like, you go to the pet store and you can find poop bags, plastic bags. So there was a specific pool of people that were reusing these plastic bags, and they relied solely on that group of people, I feel, because I can't think of why else you would reuse a plastic bag.
Well, they were used for bin liners. Research showed, and actually when Kirkland was looking at the plastic bag ban, they did a study, but there are other studies that have showed that about 80% of the thin plastic bags were used either for trash bins or I had 2 dogs when we had, believe me, you were right.
Yeah.
We used every single one of those bags.
Right.
But Bill, to your point, I think what you said earlier is right, that you don't believe any single one study. That
No.
is right. And this
Anybody who tells you that we should pass a law or repeal a law based on one study is spinning you.
I think that's exactly right. And this is, and the reason that this rings true is that it is consistent with all the other studies and plastic bag bans elsewhere. And what I think is ironic is that the people who supported the plastic bag ban didn't have the data. They said, well, here's what we think will happen. But then it's like, now that it's in place, no study is enough to undo it. So they didn't use data to justify it. But now they're saying, well, but the data that we're getting, we aren't good enough to undo it. And that I think is hypocrisy. But again,
They should have talked to me.
there are lots of evidence that the plastic bag bans don't work. This is an important issue to me. In my book, Time to Think Small, available at Amazon.
That's Time to Think Small.
Yes, right. I talk about plastic in the ocean. It's really a big problem. We don't want plastic in the ocean. But the problem with plastic in the water and the ocean and microplastics comes primarily from developing countries who don't have good systems. And so there are great organizations, my favorite is called Plastic Bank, that work in those areas to reduce that harm. That's a much better way to solve this problem than plastic bag bans, which do have these unintended consequences.
But aren't we back to where we started? We can do a yes and? Like, why not take those actions in the developing world, so-called, and also, because it's not just a question of whether there's more waste produced, as we heard from Ryan, there could be different reasons for that, but also we do have a microplastics issue here, and not to mention the litter problem. I don't see the place littered with cloth tote bags.
Well, now we can discuss this. We're running out of time.
Okay.
But what the research shows is that cloth tote bags are actually much worse for the environment.
They're more carbon intensive.
They're more carbon intensive. You have to put more fertilizer and more pesticides on. That fertilizer and pesticides runs off. It creates eutrophication, which are called dead zones. This is why
What about organic cotton tote bags?
It's even worse. Because it uses far more. That's actually all the research shows that organic cotton is worse.
Sorry to interrupt. Is it the mode of production that they're getting this from? Like what it takes to make these things?
Yeah, it's the cotton itself. It's growing the cotton itself. And because organic is a lower yield per acre, it's more damage. This is why when Rhode Island was looking at banning plastic bags, the head of research at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, perhaps the premier ocean-related institute in the world, drove down to Rhode Island and testified against it because he said the alternatives are actually worse. So, like I said, to your point, this study is just one study, but it is consistent with others.
Okay. Do we about cover it for now? It's hard to, go and I commend you all to go and find out more about the trade-offs. Many, many trade-offs around your bin liner, your bag, your tote. Let us make time to pass on to listeners something that did the opposite of make us frown for a change. Did anything make you smile instead this week?
OpenAI is getting rid of the deep fakes. And if you don't know what a deep fake is, it's like a digitally altered video of like someone who is either alive or was once alive. And they're getting rid of the deep fakes of Martin Luther King upon request of his estate, which I'm happy about because I was started seeing those too. So
OpenAI is somehow banning their platforms being used to create celebrity.
Yes, specifically of Martin Luther King. I have to read to see if it's other celebrities as well, but I know that there's been issue with, I know Taylor Swift had sued about it as well, with people creating digitally altered AI videos.
Okay.
But I think it's a little extra disrespectful when that person is no longer here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else smile-worthy?
I smiled at the baseball games for the fun banter between the Canadians and the Mariners fans. Definitely competitive. We definitely want our team to win. But everybody, gets along very well, and everybody was very nice. And I love that
T-Mobile
spirit.
Park?
Yes, I love that.
You were
spirit.
there.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And so I think it's very nice, and it's great. You want to do your best. You want your team. You root for your team. That's fantastic, and you pull for them as hard as you can. But ultimately was very good. And then I like fall. I like the fall weather, so that makes me happy.
Fall is lovely. Ryan?
What made me smile this week was the completion of a bike path on East Marginal Way. It's a bike path and whole street redesign. Started in 2013 under Mike McGinn with a study, and it took all this long to finally get to a place where there's a great separated bike trail, space for trucks to be very separate from people biking between West Seattle and downtown. It's a good example of really kind of something we can do well, and I'm really looking forward to using it every time I head over to Alki Beach.
And now it's autumn. You won't sweat too much by pedaling your way to wherever you're going. Okay, I'll just add that I've been gone a couple of weeks because I was road tripping across the country with friends. And on Monday, I was in Cody, Wyoming, and we were watching the Mariner game at a bar there. And when the Mariners would score, one of my friends would jump out of his seat, out of our booth, and circle around high-fiving people, whether they liked it or not. And most people just went along with it. But one guy would really high-five back and really get into it. And he bought us a round of drinks. And it turns out, so after we chatted, that this guy knows someone who two of my friends also know. So this guy sent his friend a photo of our group, and this guy texted back, "What are you doing with these two?" And so then we're talking, and he's a travel nurse who grew up in Montana, and now he's in Wyoming. And so to your point, Todd, I'm not the biggest sports fan. I don't understand the level of identification with sports, but I had a good time at a bar in Cody, Wyoming with a fellow human being. Yeah.
Yeah, I think sports is one of those things that can do it. You don't have to be, doesn't matter your politics, doesn't matter your background. You can all get together, and I think that's fantastic.
Oh, did we just do that for the last hour? Did we just get together, whether we agreed or disagreed?
In the spirit of the Mariners.
Indeed. Let's dedicate it to Eugenio Suarez and hope he can get a hit. Nonfiction writer and journalist Lauryn Bray, thank you for coming together with us.
Thank you for having me.
Contributing editor at The Urbanist, Ryan Packer. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
And vice president for research at the Washington Policy Center, Todd Myers.
It was fun. Thanks.
Enjoyed it. I enjoyed being produced by Kevin Kniestet with Kathy Faulkner making it sound great on the board, and help from Juan Pablo Chiquiza and Hans Twite. My name is Bill Radke, and we'll be back, win or lose. Whether the Mariners are still playing or not, we'll be here. So join us again for the next Week in Review.
This is KUOW